Chodesh Tov. We are talking this morning. It's Rosh Chodesh Mar Heshvan, Sunday morning, and we're talking a little bit about the parasha of Bereshit. What's interesting is the first Rashi in the Torah says Amar Rabbi Yitzhak. Rashi asks a question: should the Torah have been started with Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, starting it from the first mitzvah of the Torah? God said, this is the first month of the year, you have to make Birkat Levana. That was the first mitzvah. So Rashi says, why don't you start the Torah with that, instead of starting with Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Rashi tells us, because it's going to come a time where the other nations of the world are going to say, listen, you're the Jewish nation, you went into the land of Canaan, and you uprooted the 7 nations, you took their country, and they're going to make a claim. Rashi says the Torah starts with Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, to tell us that God created the world, and God had given that land, Canaan, to previous nations, 7 of them, and it was God's will that they should have it until a certain point. And after a certain point, He granted that land to us, and that's why it's ours, and it's going to stay ours in our possession for the rest of history. And this is very important, because people might say, no, you have to allow them also space, let them live together side by side. The Torah doesn't say that. Torah is very clear, and Rashi opens up the first Rashi in the Torah. His first message to anyone reading, to even little children that start Chumash Rashi, is that this land and all the land of this world belongs to God. And if God granted a small piece of land to the Jewish nation because He decided that another nation shouldn't have it, or the 7 shouldn't have it, that's His will. And if you notice, the Ben Ish Hai, when he opened up the halachot of Parashat Bereshit, he discusses halachot Tzizit, the halacha of Tzizit, and he goes into all the details. And it's well known that the Ben Ish Hai discusses things, Rabbi Yosef Haim, from the Sod, while Rashi says, Lo bati ela lepeshuto shel mikra. He came for the simple interpretation, Rashi, and he came for just the basics. So I went back and I wanted to do a little bit of research, and I wanted to see, is there a connection between the Ben Ish Hai's discussion of Tzizit and the first Rashi on the Sefer Torah? Okay, Rashi is talking about the land, and we're looking at the Ben Ish Hai Tzizit. Is there any connection? I have good news, and I believe I found a very good connection. Let's take a look. So first, why do we even have the mitzvah of Tzizit? We're going to find out in this week's Parashat Noach, that after Noach finished 120 years of building the Teva, and he rebuked the people and nobody listened, and then he got all the animals, and he was on the Teva for a year. He got off the Teva. Rashi and that Mefarshim tell us that he went and he planted a vineyard. He planted the seed that day. The grapes grew that day. He squeezed the grapes and made a wine in one day, and he drank it that day, and unfortunately, he got drunk in one day. Yeah, that's right.
I thought after the Chet of Adam Arishon, that now it was longer.
What was longer?
That if you want to work the ground.
So you're right. It was longer, and that was one of the punishments of the land, which we're going to talk about later. But here it was saying that when Noah did it, he knew how to plant. He knew the old system. Remember, he was from the old generation, so he knew how things worked. And right away he planted, it came out. He drank from it and he got drunk. And different Mefarshim discuss what happened, whether he got sodomized or he got castrated by Ham or Canaan, and back and forth. And Noach later on, when he finds out all this, first he has 2 boys, Shem and Yafet. Shem and Yafet see what happened. Right away Shem sees his father naked on the floor, sees what happened, and he quickly covers him with whatever he had. Could have been a towel, could have been his jacket. He just wanted to cover his father so that he's not embarrassed. Now, he was in his tent when this happened, it says Ba'aholo, but still he wanted him to have some form of a shmirah and protect.
The day he got drunk?
The day he got drunk. Yeah. Now, when Yafet saw that, Yafet said, I want to cover my dad too, but it took him a few more minutes, and he went to go get a nice blanket, a nice quilt, instead of just covering with just a towel or whatever. But when you look at the pasuk says Vayikach. It doesn't say Vayikchu, which is interesting. I'll show it to you inside. It says here Vayikach Shem Vayafet Vayefet et simla vayisum al shechem shenehem. They put it on their back so they don't see their father, and then they let it down. It says vayichasu et ervat avihim. Their father was naked. Ufnehem acharonit. Their face was not looking at him. Ve'ervat avihim lo rahu. They didn't see their father naked. When they saw the whole situation, they understood something was wrong. Right away when they glanced, they didn't look. They put it backwards from their back and they covered their father. Okay, and it says there, Rashi says that why it says vayikach, not vayikchu, because it was two people. Vayikchu is plural. Why would it says vayikach for in the singular? Limed al Shem. It's telling us that Shem shenit ametz b'mitzvah yoter mi Yafet. That he was a little bit quicker in the mitzvah. Lechach zachu banav letalit shel Tzizit. Therefore, the children of Shem got the Tzizit. Now, I want to go into one part. Now, at the end of the day, Shem ended up getting the mitzvah of Tzizit. Yeah, Ezra?
So if this didn't happen, there would be no mitzvah of Tzizit.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to get. It's exactly what I'm going to get to right now.
And who is the oldest out of all three of them?
I believe it was Shem that is the oldest. If I'm not.
Who did this to the father?
This was done through Cham and Canaan. Cham, there's three boys, Shem, Cham, and Yafet. Okay? Cham was worried. What was he worried about? You notice that his father got off the teva, and he was concerned that right now the entire world has how many families? 3 families plus Noah. He was worried that if his father's going to now have more children, the world's going to be divided into more pieces. And this is one of the reasons it brought down, that because of that, he wanted to make sure that his father was not going to have any more children. And he did by castrating his father. Some say they sodomized him, some say both. So whatever it was that he did, he wanted to make sure that there would be no more children. Now, Noah wanted to curse Cham, but he was a little bit in a debacle because God already had blessed everybody that was on the teva and that came off the teva. And because God had blessed Cham, he could not do this. So he skipped a generation and he cursed the children of Ham, Canaan, primarily. Now, you're right, you asked a question about the mitzvah of Tzizit. Maybe the mitzvah of Tzizit could have come up in a different way, but for the sake of this discussion today, we're going to talk about it, that this is the system. So he ends up, Shem and Yafet end up covering their father. Rashi tells us that later on Shem got the mitzvah, but we're going to go into the situation where now they both did an act that allowed them to get this mitzvah. Now, it could have been the children of Yefet, it could have been the children of Shem that ended up having the mitzvah. It says later that Yefet's reward was that during the milchama of Gog and Magog, which is, I believe, we're really at the cusp of with what's happening now in Israel and in Gaza and everything that recently happened on Hoshana Rabbah 5784. But it says that Yefet's going to get the reward of being buried after that war. There's going to be tons of bodies, and all the children of Yefet are going to have zechut to be buried, while I guess others are not going to have it. So what happened, according to the research, is that they both did an act that allowed both Shem and Yefet to end up having the mitzvah of Tzizit. Later on came Abraham Avinu, and Abraham Avinu ends up going to war with the 4 kings and the 5 kings. He ends up winning the war, and he finds out that Bera, the king of Sodom, ends up telling everybody, you know why Abraham Avinu is so rich? Because he robbed Sodom and he robbed me blank. What did I tell you? He literally went into Sodom, he sent a couple of malachim, he took out his nephew, his brother-in-law, Lot. He took him with him, and they burned the whole city down. He took all the people, he took all the money, he took whatever he wanted to take. Now, when Abraham Avinu heard this, he didn't want anyone to go around like Bera, saying that Abraham became rich because he took all of his money.
Who's Bera?
Bera was the king of Sodom. Bet Resh Ayin. It's easy to remember because Bera means bad. He was a bad guy. He wasn't a good guy. So he ends up telling Bera, listen, I'm going to give you back all your money. I'm going to give you back everything. I'm not going to give you the people, the slaves. I'm going to let those stay by me or go free. He gives him back everything. When he gives back Bera all of the money and material booty that he ends up winning from the war, he tells him, I'm going to give you everything, mechut ve'ad seroch na'al. Everything, including threads and even a shoelace. I'm going to make sure I'm not keeping anything from you. I don't want you to think that I took anything from you or give me any credit. He ends up returning everything. It says there in Rashi that because he did that, the Gemara has a few discussions. We got another mitzvah. We grabbed the mitzvah of the Tzizit permanently, because right now it was in limbo. Rashi tells us it was Shem, but it was in limbo between Shem and Yafet. We grabbed it fully to the children of Shem, which was Abraham, a descendant of Shem. And the Gemara has another argument. It says that maybe it could have been that they got Chalitzat HaNa'al, of the when they do Chalitza, they have to wear that special shoe and they tie the lace. Some say it was that, some say it was the Ritzuot of the Tefillin. So there's a whole discussion. But for today, we're going to discuss that it was the Tzitzit that he got. And also, Abraham Avinu, he's the one who gets Lech lecha me'arzecha u'mimolatecha ela arz asher eka. Go to Eretz Canaan, I'm going to give you this land. What's interesting is Abraham goes to the land, God promises him the land, and the first thing that he gets into the land, he's coming up with problems. He goes to one territory, they tell him you can't live here. He goes to one area, they want to fight him, they want to challenge him. It's awkward. Imagine God tells somebody, I'm going to give you something. He goes to get it, and everyone is challenging him left and right. And Abraham Avinu is stuck in that situation. But he pursues it, and he ends up becoming successful. So Abraham gets the land, and he's also the one that perpetrates the succession of the Tzitzit for Klal Yisrael. Okay? Now watch this. It says in the Beracha of the Yotzer, we say every morning, Maher ve'aveh aleinu, quickly bring for us, Beracha me'arba kanfot ha'aretz, from the four corners of the world. Right? A lot of times when I used to read this as a kid, I didn't understand. Was Anshe Knesset HaGedolah telling us that the world is a flat plane, a flat earth that had four corners? I don't think so, because the Gemara does mention many places that the world is round and it's circular, and it brings up in many places. So what was it telling us Me'arba kanfot ha'aretz? Because I found from the Mefarshim that the Achizah, the holding on to the land of Eretz Yisrael, is done how? Through mitzvot. But which mitzvah is the primary mitzvah of holding the land of Eretz Yisrael? Is a mitzvah of Tzitzit. Why Tzitzit? Because also, where does the word kanaf come out? Al kanfe vigdehem. We also have the mitzvah of the kanaf. So the arba kanfot ha'aretz, that God's going to gather us from the four corners of the world to our land. On Kanfei Nishanim, very good, Ezra. How? Through the Kanfei Nishanim, excellent, very good. No, listen, planes look like a Kanfei Nishanim, but it's interesting. That's right, with the Kanfei Nishanim, and he brings them to the Kanfot of Eretz Yisrael, the four corners of the land of Israel. But in what zechut? In the zechut of the mitzvah of Tzitzit. And what's interesting is it says that when you do the mitzvah of the Talit, or the Tzitzit in the morning, what do? You do atifa. We did it last week, remember? Where you wrap the talit, how are you supposed to do it? We did the whole video on it. What's interesting is when it says when you do the atifa, how do you do it? It says atifat ka Yishmaelim. Can I ask you a question? Since when do we ever do anything like the Yishmaelim? Since when is there any mitzvah in the Torah that says you have to do it like the Yishmaelim? Now, and I've been looking into a lot of Mefarshim to find out their reasoning. But for today's discussion, what I found is that Eretz Yisrael was granted to Abraham Avinu. Whenever we follow the Torah and the mitzvot, and primarily for the men, the mitzvah of Tzitzit kehilcheta properly, we get ahizah on Eretz Yisrael. We have a strong ahizah and the land stays close to us. The moment that we're not following the Torah mitzvot, who has ahizah on the land? Yishmael. So when we put on the Tzitzit in the morning, in the zechut of Abraham, but Abraham had two children. He had Yishmael and he had Yitzhak. And even though we got the Torah after 7 generations after Abraham, Moshe Rabbeinu comes and brings it and gives us the Sefer Torah and all the laws of the Torah, because Abraham, the father of Yishmael, in some sense didn't act, they also have something that has atifut in it, of wrapping themselves up. And it wasn't a surprise to me that I see now in Eretz Yisrael, what's the biggest mitzvah that Hayalim are doing? They're wearing tzitzit. And it spoke a lot to me because I believe that this is the connection between why the Ben Ish Hai was talking about the halachot of tzitzit and why Rashi was talking about the land. You see, the Ben Ish Hai talks in the Sod. Rashi talks in the Pshat. He was telling you Pshat, that God created the world, this is your land. The Ben Ish Hai was starting off the Torah and saying, listen, you want to hold that land that belongs to you, not the 7 nations, you need to make sure you're wearing tzitzit. And when you do it, do the atifah la Yishmaelim, because that's going to allow us to have the land further. And it's interesting that prior to probably a couple of hundred years ago, Jewish people were not allowed to own land. In Eastern Europe, in England, in France, many countries, Jews were not allowed to own land. I explained this one time to a friend of mine that had me. I said to me, why do Jewish people buy so much real estate in America? He asked me this question, and he's like, everyone's in real estate, in something. Either one guy does construction, one does the development, one's residential, one's commercial. So I told him, I don't know the exact reason, I told him, but I said to him one thing. I said, for hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years, Jews were not allowed to own land anywhere. So for the most part, the moment that you told them they can have land, they're going to become very creative and try to figure out how to get land. And so this was a result, not of our doing, but of the result of other people and other nations persecuting us for years. It's kind of like the banking industry. How did the Jewish people become so good in the banking industry and in finance? That wasn't by choice. They were not allowed to own land, and they were also not allowed to own and conduct many businesses. They were allowed to loan money. So when you tell someone that you can only do 2 or 3 types of industries, what happens? You end up having to fine tune and make the industry in a way that works for you. And that's exactly what happened. And for years, they became very good in the banking industry. They created the whole idea of currency and all this type of stuff, as opposed to the old metals. They went into fiat currencies, into printing and things like that. But that was all due to the persecution of the other nations on the Jewish people. And if, by the way, if they told the Jewish people, you couldn't, let's say, become doctors, actually, which they did, what happens? The moment that they could become doctors, Jewish people became doctors. They all became doctors. They told me you couldn't be lawyers. They all became lawyers.
That's how they created Hollywood, because they couldn't be in so many professions.
That's right. So they couldn't. That's right. Very good. They went into the movie production also, because they were not. It's funny. It's like they called this the rule of unintended consequences. That sometimes the intent to do something. Let's stop A, B, and C, and suddenly they notice that D, E, and F started. Another problem started. At least not a problem, but at least they consider it in some form of that. And so, but what we see here also, what other connection I made, is that when Yosef HaSadiq ends up getting thrown into the pit, and he ends up getting sold, he gets sold a few times. He gets sold to Midyanim, but who was the one that brings him down to Egypt? The Yishmaelim. Why? Because that was at the cusp of the Sinat Hinam the brothers had on Yosef. And because of that Sinat Hinam, it was the beginning of the destruction of the land of Israel, that the Jewish people were not going to have. They were going down to Mitzrayim. So who was sending Yosef down to Mitzrayim and starting to take Ahizah in the land, a hold of the land? It was Yishmaelim. They were saying, no problem. You guys want to fight amongst yourselves? You want to have Sinat Hinam? You want to throw your brother into a pit and let us sell him for you down to Egypt? No problem.
Send Yishmaelim.
They sent the Yishmaelim. Hashem was sending them a message. You know why he's the FedEx courier to take him down? Because they're going to be the next people that are going to hold the land of Israel, because you have Sinat Hinam. And it shows us how Ahavat Hinam, loving people in Eretz Yisrael and loving your Jewish brothers. When I mean love, I mean you have to love the person you hate the most in Am Yisrael. If you could even hate somebody, if we could say that, but when it says Ahavat Yisrael, it's not talking about the person you love. It's not talking about you and Yossi, that you guys love each other, or Ezra and Ariel. It's not talking about. It's talking about what's the Jew that you know, that you, for some reason, you have a sichsuch, you have a vikuach, you have an argument, something.
Even those that are holding that sign.
Yes. Even those, even the Torah Karta. I hate to say this, but even the Torah Karta, even those that might be classified as a Rishaim, you have to have some ahava. They're your brothers, they're your sisters, and we're all part of Klal Yisrael. And
how you can have the whatever they do is cause us to lose.
So
lives. They're helping our enemy. How are you supposed to love somebody that's helping your enemy?
Okay.
Even if it's your Jew, whatever. I don't believe those people are Jews.
First, that's another question. It could be that they're not even Jewish. I don't just because.
Are they helping them by posing? I don't think they're helping them by posing the picture.
Look, there's a lot of different shitot about Eretz Yisrael, having the land of Israel, and all that stuff. And we're not going to go into the whole argument of what certain individuals had and opinions. They're very, but for the sake of this discussion, having Ahavat Yisrael is talking about having Ahava to some extent to Jews that you don't like. Now, if the halacha says that they're Ishaim and you have to hate them, then you have to hate them. But even in those situations, can you find something in them that says that you could have some Ahava to them? Or maybe if we were to possibly approach the matter in a way that is more friendly with Shalom, maybe it would be different. There's no question that those individuals that march the Neturei Karta with the Palestinians and with the Iranians, they're off their mark big time. There's some mental problem with them, because even, I can tell you straight out, they have some mental problem. Because even if they have the halakha on their side, let's say they have someone that they're following, they follow that shita. Let's say the extent of going with the enemy and marching with them is a level that is way beyond even that support, because there are people that have different opinions about different things. By the way, Neturei Karta has synagogues and Batei Midrash and live in Israel too, by the way. They live in Israel. There are people in Israel that are Neturei Karta. So the whole idea of marching with the enemy is a different level than having a different opinion. Okay, some people believe that maybe the government of Israel, or because it's secular, or because of some reasons they don't want to follow. I got it. But going to the level, going with alongside the enemy and empowering them is so stupid. And not only is it stupid, because if anything, history has told us anything, because these people that are marching the Neturei Karta are not marching with Europeans, they're marching with Arabs. Okay, mostly they're Arabs or those of the Muslim faith that have become radicalized to that extent.
So to say to love this kind of people, I think it's a little bit more naive, or be too nice to, because these people need to be in jail. They need to be, I don't know, somewhere that nobody can contact them and talk to them, and shouldn't be seen all over the world with signs, being Arabs, and
but
support what they do.
For sure, but what I'm trying to tell you is that these individuals are mostly Europeans. They're not Arabs. What I mean is that I'm an Arab Jew. I descend from Lebanese Jews who came from Iraq. I have at least 1,000 years in the country of Iraq. We're not Spanish, my family. We never were in Spain. So what I mean to say is that even if I have an opinion, which I don't, that maybe certain things are not perfect in the land of Israel, or the government, or whatever it is that I don't march with a group of people that for the last 75 years uprooted my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my father from the countries they lived in. Only a European that doesn't understand the background of these countries would do such a thing, because these Neturei Karta don't understand that. What do they think? That these Arabs that they're marching with are going to let them survive? They're just going to be the next on the list.
Same with the Yishmaelim and the Kibbutzim.
Meaning,
they don't understand, because
they
never lived.
Yeah, meaning it's same thing. Like you're saying, Ezra. Like even the Yishmaelim in Israel, there was always, and I have an uncle that is the most hardcore leftist liberal in Israel, Yishmaelimi, you cannot imagine. And I try to avoid having any conversations about this type of stuff with him, because we always go to two different, polarized directions. And I'm all for Eretz Yisrael, with the Torah, with the mitzvot, with the Chachamim, kind of like what you would call a theocracy. A theocracy is a country run through the religion. Because I believe the Torah is emet. And I believe that whatever the Torah is saying has truth to it, that it's the best way to live. But even the Yishmaelim in Israel, they're waking up now after this catastrophe that happened on Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret 5784. They're waking up and they're saying to themselves, something here, it doesn't work. Because if I'm not mistaken, this whole concert that they did by the border was one that was supposed to be, for peace amongst the other nations and things to that nature. I don't know exactly the details, but besides that, there was issues of Mehalel Shabbat and Avodah Zarah and Gilui Arayot and things like that. Besides that, which God hates, there's certain things that they burn down in the Sfarim that God hates and despises. Of course, Hilul Shabbat is a big one, but Avodah Zarah, that's a big no-no. There's a lot of things that upset God. But when the things that stand up the most is of the avodah zarah is the worst. Putting a Buddha and dancing around it is avodah zarah, even if it's being done as a joke. We didn't learn all the Rambam Hilchot avodah zarah, which we'll do in the future. But even because it says in Baal Peor was the avodah zarah that they did when they were in the Transjordan area. That's where Moshe Rabbeinu is buried, right across from Baal Peor. What was Baal Peor? Baal Peor was a statue that people used to defecate in front of. They would go to the bathroom in front of it. So when the Umot HaOlam were doing this avodah zarah, Baal Peor, and they told the Jewish people about it, the Jewish people were like laughing about it. They were saying, "What's the big deal?" Like they didn't believe in it. They didn't care about it. It was almost like they were defiling it through their excrement that they were doing when they did this avodah zarah. And even though they had no kavanah to do it and they didn't want it to be what it was, you're not allowed to do the act. Meaning the act in and of itself is a problem. It's no different than when they throw these pennies into like a pond of water. They say it's like throwing even the murkalis. It's a type of throwing an avodah zarah where they would throw pennies to the avodah zarah in the water, and then people, I guess later they would gather the pennies or collect the money or whatever. That's a form of avodah zarah. That's why we don't do it. We don't throw pennies and these type of things like people do, or make wishes. That's not something that's a Jewish thing. And even if it's just done as a joke, even if these people that were all at the concert, they didn't believe that Buddha was anything, it's still
go for this.
It's still asur. But what's happening now is they're waking up. But what are we connecting? We're connecting again the Tzizit and Ahizah of Eretz Yisrael. Is that by holding on to the Tzizit and strengthening this mitzvah, we're going to have the Ahizah in Eretz Yisrael much, much more. So I told everybody yesterday when we spoke about this in the village of Bel Harbor that everyone should start wearing the tzitzit. Everyone should upgrade their tzitzit. If you're wearing cotton, maybe buy the wool, buy the hand strings, upgrade your talitot. Doing this allows us to have more beracha of Ahizah of Eretz Yisrael. And I think with this zechut, we'll be matzliach and being able to hold the land and succeeding. B'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Ken Yiratzon.